Oh, how are you? It's Louisa Carl Munson from Feel Good Astrology, but actually, I'm actually working on the Barefoot Broadcast. Forgive me for getting my show wrong. Oh, I've got the Friday morning feeling. How are you feeling today? So I've got two repeat guests coming back. I've got Dr. Joe Delaney, who was on a couple of weeks ago, and I've also got lovely GIllian Alexander, who was just on last week. And this is a big old topic. It's let's talk about redemption. Now, I don't really think about redemption too much. So I just thought, let me think, like, what is it? Let me tune in to what it is. And I thought, you know what, I'm really tired. It's the end of the week. And so I've just looked it up in terms of a dictionary meaning. And it's the action of saving or being saved from sin, error, or evil. God's plan for the redemption of his world. Wow. Anyway, knowing how these conversations have gone so far, I'm pretty sure it's going to go on quite a wild, possibly cosmic, and pretty interactive path. So join me as I bring on Dr. Joe and GIllian now, and let's see where this conversation takes us. Okie dokes. I can see them both in the green room. And here we are. Good morning. How are you both? Dr. Joe, how are you doing? You got a lovely house there.
Yeah, it's not real. It's a backdrop.
I've used that one myself before.
Yeah, it's very pleasant. And the piano needs tuning like myself, really. Yeah, I'm very well. Looking forward to this, and lovely to see GIllian. And of course, Louisa, it's lovely to see you again.
Oh, bless you. GIllian, how are you today?
Good, but I'm in some weird time warp.
Oh, no, really?
I was convinced it was 5:02 and suddenly it was 6 minutes past. Anyway.
You know what? I've had that. And today is actually also the full moon. And I think a lot of people are a bit full moony. I got virtually no sleep. All the dogs were barking. The cats were going crazy last night. Carl was twitching and making noise, and our 4-year-old was also grinding his teeth and stuff. So I just had to get up at 2. I'm feeling really quite tired now. But hey, let's see how this goes anyway. Maybe other people are feeling a bit full moony. Am I the only one that doesn't sleep very well at the time of the full moon? How do you know?
No, I do it sometimes, but I don't know what's going on at the moment. And I post up on Facebook, so I know other people are getting the same.
Yeah,
it's just like getting out of bed in the morning is insanely like treacly at the moment. And I think that's a cortisol thing, but I don't know quite why I'd be doing cortisol and full blow at the moment. But anyway.
Fascinating. Well, I'm sure that can come in. We've got a few people joining us. The Ancient Mariner is saying Bob Marley, the redemption song, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. Great line. None but ourselves can free our minds. Thank you so much for putting that in. I think that's a good place to start. Carl saying good morning, Captain. Hello, lovely people, from Jenny Ann Slater, who was obviously on this time last week. Trigger alert, God got mentioned. That's true. And Jenny saying, yes, have been doing night shifts this week. So yeah, I think she's been affected. So where do we want to start this morning then? I think it's going to get quite real.
Yeah, I think it is. I think from my point of view, I just try and share my experience, my strength, and my hope, and just hope that sort of shatters people's thoughts on reality and makes them question their very existence. I think that's what my function is, really. But try to do it in a light-hearted and heyoka type style.
What's that? What was that last word?
Heyoka. A heyoka is the Native American Indian joker, really. You know,
oh, okay.
It's the sort of second in command who sort of watches everything from behind, and then chucks a line in or two every now and then just to, stir things up. Basically, it's about rocking the boat without falling out. Really, that's what I'm trying to do.
Excellent. Well, I'm very happy for you to do that in your Heyoka style. and to like shatter my mind, I could really do with that happening. Actually, I think that'd be great. GIllian, what are you hoping for in this session?
I'm just laughing at Joe's mention of the hairdresser, because I definitely play that role often, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh dear, it could get messy.
Yeah,
no, I think our job is to take the piss, really, and you know, to try and do it in a way. I mean, just by opening our mouths, really, and seeing what comes out. Because a lot of the time, I have to play these things back to see what I've actually been saying. Because I try not to let me editor come in to sort of direct the conversation. So it's something that's I think anyway, because I'm just learning like everybody else. Is open me gob, open me heart, and just like speak really, and see what happens.
Bloody
yeah, nothing's that serious, is it really?
Especially all the bollocks that's got, excuse my French, but especially all the, I'll call it French, you know.
If you put a French
the bolo that's going on at the moment in this lunatic world, absolutely.
Yeah.
Lunatic.
Well, I'm gonna say, why don't you start us off on this wonderful subject? Sorry to point with my biro. I'm not quite sure how to do these pointing things with these reversed cameras, but it was your subject title, wasn't it, about redemption? So where do you want to get the ball rolling?
Just I spent about 20 years of my life trying to kill myself, basically, and drink myself into oblivion. And I made 3 serious attempts to kill myself because I just couldn't handle it anymore. I was full of guilt, full of remorse, you know, and full of self-pity. And I found my way to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous for 40 years, but it took me 9 years in AA to understand what they were saying. And basically it was selfishness, self-centeredness that we think is the root of all our problems. And I thought, you know, what do you mean by that? You know, and I didn't like it at first because they were suggesting that I was a selfish person, but they didn't mean that. They meant egocentric, you know, and I was filled with self-centered fear, and all my reactions to life had basically been fear conditioned behavior, you know, even since I was a small age, really. And I was kindly sort of guided through what they call the 12-step program of recovery. And at the end, I followed it to the letter. And then the miracle happened, you know, because I lost my wife and kids. I lost my marriage. I lost my job. I lost my liberty. And in the end, I lost my home. And I was basically sleeping on a park bench, you know, and it was miraculous. And I'm not a religious person anymore. I used to be a devout Roman Catholic. In fact, at the age of 11, I was sent away to train to be a priest. You know, that's what they used to do. They send you away at 11 as the eldest in the family, Roman Catholic family. That was sort of the tradition. And all sorts of stuff went on there. You know, I didn't stay there very long because I missed my mum. You know, I was supremely sensitive. I'd been attached to my mother's leg, you know, until I was 38 years of age. And I can see clearly that I'd never had an opportunity to make up my own mind and think for myself, you know. So that was it, really. And to me, redemption almost means like turning the other cheek, to use a sort of a biblical expression, and look in a completely different direction. And I know today, and I'll shut up after this, but I know today that every time I'm emotionally triggered by anything at all, it's my ego that's threatened at some level, whether that be conscious or unconscious. And people don't want to hear this, because I certainly didn't, because I'd prefer to say that I was brought up in an impoverished environment. My mother treated me like shit. The Christian brothers are horrible to me. The priests in the training, you know, and I was told quite clearly in AA that if you point the finger that way, there's always 3 fingers coming back at you, you know, and that's I, self, me. How am I allowing this, and how am I giving my power away? And it's been really 32 years now since I've been clean and sober and looking at this and trying to find ways to sort of express it in a way that's helpful to other people. Other than that, it's a nice day, really.
This is really good timing, because I felt very triggered in the last 12 hours. And actually thinking about the situation I was fretting about, I had made myself important in it. I self me. Yeah, thank you. Very useful. That's a huge thing. I mean, I've heard your story before, actually. You know, you shared it before, but I think it's really important that, you know, like you're sharing it again, because, you know, a lot of people, I read years ago, I had a bit of an alcohol problem, and I read The Easy Way to Control Alcohol by Alan Carr. And in it, he talks about selfishness, but he also says, you know, lots of people think that if you've got an addiction, you must be somehow like, you don't have a very strong constitution, like you're really weak-willed or something. Alan Carr actually said the opposite. It takes a lot to drink yourself into losing everything, and to put it so, like, you must have been really dedicated to end up living on a park bench. I mean, I was never a very good alcoholic, because after I tried quite a few times, I had a few good goes at it, but I never had the balls to really, really go down that. So I always think people who have gone through, you know, a process like you've gone through, much stronger than people realize. It's huge. Hope you don't mind me saying that.
Not at all.
It's awesome. You're giggling, GIllian.
I know, sorry. I mean, I've got, because my mother was a bottle of whiskey a day plus a couple of litres of cider, because that's not alcoholic.
Oh, okay, yeah. That's like,
no, I mean, we started drinking
very
when we could reach.
isn't it?
No, we started drinking when we could reach the milk jug on the cupboard, in the cupboard shelf that had the homemade wine in it. So, I mean, I used to send my friends home absolutely bottomed when they were about 8. I mean, if my son had gone to a friend's house and come back with this whiff of alcohol in their blood and then their breath on his breath, I would have gone daft at him, and obviously marched straight round. So I don't know. It was a very different time too, but there's the whole thing. The whole redemption story in amongst alcoholism is very easy to see, because I mean, my mother was an amazing woman, absolutely amazing woman. It was a coping strategy, and do you know the amount of forgiveness she received from people because she was an amazing woman? I mean, she could be vile to people and they would still come back again. It was quite incredible. It was like I used to sit there and think, what is going on? But I felt the same towards her. You know, she was the most challenging human being I have ever encountered, but I adored her. And do you know, the biggest gift she gave me was she showed me how to be wild.
Wow, that's a good thing.
Sorry, I really want to. It was him talking about, I can't remember what he was talking about. Oh, yes, men's genitalia, the hangy doon bits. I'm so grateful for that sort of florid depiction of wildness, because you were saying, Joe, before, and I can't remember your language around it, but it was something about, you were just saying about being deeply sensitive. And I was just thinking that, and I said thinking, it might be nonsense, but, you know, there's almost like this kind of gradation from people who are completely bypassing, completely in denial, through to those that feel everything. And it's a really tricky place to be, to feel everything. Really tricky. Yeah. Because it's not, and I think when you start feeling, I don't know whether it's just me, or whether it's a general thing, but when you start feeling everything, it's very tricky to determine what's you and what's other. So you start feeling everybody's stuff as well. And especially if you're a sensitive child, growing up surrounded by very damaged adults, which we all have been, I think, to a certain extent. Yeah. You know, I'm pretty sure, I think it's a generational thing. And when I look around at all my friends, families and stuff like that, I don't know any of them that are sorted. You know, that generation thing. I mean, my mother was 40, a couple of months away from 40 when she had me, so there was almost like 2 generation gap between me and her, and Dad, I think, was like 4 or 5. It's terrible, I don't know what age gap there was between them, so it was almost like 2 generations that I was experiencing there. And, you know, so that he'd been through the war and stuff like that. Well, she had, both of them had been through the war, but Dad was actually in the Air Force and stuff like that. So, you know, that has its big thing as well. So, you know, I mean, they had, and I don't know what was out there in the general soup, but huge amount of child abuse and incest and everything else like that, and then the alcoholism and everything to cope with it. So yeah, if ever there was any time that needed redemption, God love them, it was that generation or those generations.
I think that's really
Sorry, I rambled.
No, I think that's really lovely, actually, because a lot of people, when they look at up a generation or up 2 generations, we often feel kind of angry about, you know, I don't necessarily see as much self-reflection in older generations. I'm talking like personally, in terms of my parents, you know, in fact, we had a conversation this summer, and we were talking about different generations and how there appeared to be quite a big generation gap between people's experience. And my mum said, why would anyone have anything against our generation? All we did was work hard and do this. We're the post-war babies. And it was said with such a strong feeling, like, you cannot have anything against our generation. And what came across was, wow, there's a lot of hurt here. And I think there's a lot of people that aren't even aware of the fact they have the hurt. It's like programmed in. And if you go a generation higher, and I think, you know, in our generations and the ones before, it's like these patterns are starting to break out. And so we are the ones that maybe look like the problem children that are starting to break out from these patterns that are really difficult to live in. Yeah, interesting. I just want to share a couple of comments, and I really want to check in with you, Joe, because you're looking very thoughtful.
You mean miserable?
No, you better not be miserable. It's bloody Friday. Cheer up. The girl saying, I have so much respect for you and your process, Joe. No true redemption in this world, as far as I can see. Only God offers and is redemption. Thank you, God. I'm surprised Carl's gone down that God route, but like, people often find different words for it, don't they? But I like it. Thank you for sharing that. Ancient Mariner is saying the ego can be spotted, managed, and maybe even anticipated. The dangerous one is the id and reptilian brain, which can spawn some fairly awkward behavior without us even being aware of what's going on. That might be what I was talking about a little bit in terms of some of the older generations that can't even see that there is stuff going on. And the Ancient Mariner, at the basic subliminal level of feed, fight, fuck, like that, like fee, fi, fo, fum, most of human experience can generate some fairly earthy responses, which are as spontaneous as breathing or blinking. There is no redemption from that. Okay.
Well, I see things in a slightly different way, really. I think most of what's called spirituality these days is psychology. You know, and I think people think that they understand it because they can relate it to some sort of psychological construct, like the ego and the superego. And I think the solution is beyond all that, really. It's in like a sort of a free space where there's no analysis that goes on, really. You know, that's where I feel at the moment is. The only time I sort of analyze and take a step back from stuff, and I'm still learning and still refining and still redeeming myself from the ancient past, you know. So I think I've done a lot of my own personal redemption stuff and sort of balancing karma out. But I think that we also bring with us what the Catholics call the original sin. And that's all the shit from our ancestors' pasts and behavior, you know. I see DNA as crystallized behavior from the past. Not only our personal stuff that we do but it's like a multi-sensory thing, you know, where you can like play a video recorder, then play it back so you get audio visual. I think what we've got access to is the whole lot, you know, the multi-sensory experience of our ancestors, where they made decisions based upon fear and pride. And we're having to put that right now, really. And that's all part of what I believe. And we talked about this last time, is the soul contract, you know, and I think that we chose this lesson for the soul's growth, really, you know, and we've got stuck in this sort of ego mania. And people say you've got to get shut of the ego. I don't believe that either. And this is just the way I explain it. And if it changes tomorrow, I'll accept new stuff if it works for me, you know. But I think it's not the ego that we have to get shut of. It's our ego mania, the imbalance, really. And how do you do that? Well, you find a way through slow, deep breathing and mindfulness to sit in a neutral observation sort of space. And then you can see then, this is the way it works for me, you can see all sorts of options and you can feel your way into a different option. And if you get like a zoom, that seems to be the one to go forward, you know, the one that sort of brings with it a sort of surge, or if you like, when you're moved by spirit, right, from a deep sort of intuitive perspective, you know, inspirational really, because inspire means to breathe in. I think that when you breathe in a certain way, and you can sit there, you know, without being sort of emotionally attached to any outcome, and you can see when you can be objective about your subjectivity, I think that's really when you've got a lot of freedom. Then I've gone on a lot there, but you know, this is just my way of explaining things.
That was really beautiful.
But you know, the only indication I've got now is because I honestly believe that my soul, which is a deeper level of my processing, it almost like sets the stage and sets the scene every single day. And that's why, you know, for me to go forward and for it to learn and experience through my human ego, that's the one that's this Joe Delaney thing. That's the one that's like moving. I think that the soul experiences me and my feelings, and it feeds back to the soul then. But then feeds back to the universe that sends the next message along. I've got no idea what I said there. As I say, I'm going to have to play it back. But any disturbance is almost like another refinement and tuning in process. That's how I see it.
Do you know what? I'm pretty sure GIllian will agree with that. And the fact that I also, like when I do recordings, I never know what I've said. It's like a moment. It's like a happening, isn't it? You're birthing something. It's consciousness coming out, and you know, let's not hold on to it. You know, we can always play it back, and that's the great thing about technology these days, is we've got that option. I really like what you were saying there. In fact, we were talking a little bit yesterday about the way of no thinking. And some of the difficulties around it, you know, I can't remember what the subject was. Like, oh yeah, if there was something that you could teach the world, what would it be? And, you know, Carl said the way of no thinking. And, you know, we had quite a lively discussion as to what that actually means. You know, like, are we actually sort of disempowering people by saying, don't think about it, you know, or is it a way of being whereby you are in this place of grace and space and giving yourself the freedom? I think that's what you're referring to. I think that's really lovely. GIllian.
Yeah. Yes. I'm not sure I can respond to what Joe was just because I zone out, and I don't mean I'm not listening to it. It's like I'm not engaging the same way. But the other thing, and I realize I had slightly been listening to respond, which is also a tricky one as well. So it was when Joe, I'm actually staged back because it was when Joe was sharing a bit of his story, which I think Joe's been very generous in terms of sharing his story over the years I've known and heard. But I realized I have shared some of my story, but I haven't shared. I kind of had a similar experience, but in a very different presentation, if that makes sense. About just under 25 years ago, I went stark raving bonkers. And again, I realized there's another gift from watching my mother, who was this immensely capable, immensely strong woman, just disintegrate in front of me through alcohol, was that I knew that was not the route to cope. And I remember when my son was younger, I used to worry that he hadn't seen that, if that makes sense, because it was such a useful, powerful, horrible thing to watch, but very, very powerful. And also I knew that alcohol was a depressant as well. And I just wake up every morning not wanting to wake up, wanting to be dead. That went on for 8-10 years. It's quite a long time to claw your way through, just keep going, there's a book, and I can't remember, I think something Janice Galloway, I think, is it Just Keep Breathing or something? It's something like that, but it's just, the trick is to keep breathing. I think it's something like that. And I might have even switched authors to something else as well. But anyway, it was, and I remember I also watched so many people I knew, some of them friends, some of them acquaintances, who either tried or succeeded, or very nearly succeeded, to actually end their lives while they were drunk. So I thought, right, fine, I just need to keep away from this. So it was the one time I had enough momentum to keep off alcohol. I mean, I had all the nuts and bolts of having an alcohol problem. I know I had that. I mean, I hated the idea. I hated the feeling of being drunk, but I loved the taste of alcohol. But then I was semi-weaned on it.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't.
As children as well.
Do you remember? Well, yeah, gripe water was great, but do you remember getting whiskey for teething and stuff like that? I mean, you know, we were raised on whiskey and oil of clothes for any dental issues, and you know,
it's actually much better than the crap they.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, no, I'm sure of that. I'm certain of that. But yeah, so. And I remember saying to my neighbour, my neighbours are now well through their 80s, so they would be in their 60s then, but they seemed old. But I remember saying to them, it was, I felt, because my mind was everything at that time. I had a photographic memory, didn't need diaries because I just remembered all my meetings. I mean, I was busy. You know, I was busy. I had lots of meetings at work and stuff like that. I didn't need a diary because I just memorized them all. And, you know, and it was, everything was controlled with the mind, which is sort of egoish, isn't it?
Definitely.
You know, and very sharp-tongued at times, you know, so I could control. I didn't need to raise a finger or anything. Nobody crossed me because I was vicious at times. I still think I've got that in me, but it's not as close to the surface. It was that I watched it with my father, you know, get the other bugger down before they get you. He was a supercilious, arrogant bugger, but he wasn't. He came across as that. Sorry, our language is terrible. We have to sit on the naughty step.
Fine. It's fine.
And so. Yeah, I remember saying to my neighbours that it was that I felt like I was having to walk around naked because I was so exposed. I felt so exposed because basically my mind had sort of disintegrated. I always say shattered, but it felt violent the way it went, and it just wasn't there. I was, you know, I had no awareness of. I mean, I would lose sort of hours at a time. Literally had no idea what had been happening, but. And I'm sure it was this kind of breakdown to break through or build up or whatever it was. I mean, there's something else had to come through, and it couldn't come through this cage of a mind that was going on. And yes, so in my world, you know, especially to be the local loony, although I do remember there was, I don't know why, I don't really notice this as much now, and I'm sure it's there. I have a very good ability to screen things out. But it was just, there was lots of kids causing trouble and stuff like that. And I knew as the local loony, I could go out and be proper scary without lifting a finger.
That gives you a certain freedom, doesn't it?
Power.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, and people do tend to leave you alone at that stage. But yeah, so I think we've all got these stories. Those that have really been through it.
What I like about, and thank you for sharing that. It's interesting that, like, you, even though you weren't like Joe was talking about alcohol, and I'm guessing there were many times when you lost a memory or can't remember what happened, and without alcohol, you know, like the full expression of feeling everything and trying to control everything resulted in you also having these moments where, you know, all of a sudden there was this gap in time. And I wonder if that is something that happens when our ability to cope with life is just so stressed that, you know, something comes in to like take away the impact of it.
Yeah, I had loads of blackouts, and people think blackouts just when you fall apart and go unconscious and stuff like that. And it's when you can seemingly from the outside appear normal, right? But you can't remember. And I've gone into a pub, right, and come round sort of 100 miles away in Birmingham and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So from Birkenhead to Birmingham, right, all sorts of, and I see that as a dimensional shift and also a time shift as well. You know, without going too much into the metaphorical and stuff like that, metaphysical. But you know, I was what I call now a secondary narcissist in drink, you know, and
What's
there's
a secondary narcissist?
secondary narcissist. Well, a narcissist, a primary narcissist, feels no guilt, feels no remorse, feels no regret. And while I was drinking, I didn't feel any of those things. My behavior was vile. You know, if you look at vile being evil and stuff like that, it was, you know, and in blackout, right, I was ferociously violent, ferociously destructive. I terrorized my wife and children. I've thrown televisions out of windows. I've destroyed places and stuff like that, you know. And I look back at that now, and of course I have regret, but I had to go through a certain set of principles and actions to almost like neutralize that and to realize that alcohol is disinhibitory. And what was happening is the alcohol's in the bottle, but the ism's in me. And so when I didn't drink alcohol, I still had the ism, right? And people don't want to, you know, I've sponsored many people, hundreds and hundreds of people through AA. And the denial, like it was in me, is just phenomenal, because they think that as soon as they stop drinking, they're going to become a saintly person and they're going to have a nice life and all that. And it couldn't be further from the truth. The spiritual awakening that you get by going through the 12 steps is just the start of the journey, really. You know, and really, alcoholism as it's got nothing to do with alcohol, you know, because all addictive behaviors, as far as I'm concerned, are all to do with the soul's progress and how we've been programmed before we even came here. And, you know, my sort of feeling now is this is more like physics than anything else. It's quantum physics, and it's all about dimensional shifts and how we can consciously now, we can almost like time travel if we get this right, you know. So that's where I'm up to now, really. And, you know, I'm like GIllian, you know, I can always still feel this underlying, don't mess with me, right? Because if you do, right, I can look after myself. And I think it's almost like when I was drinking, it was ferocious and destructive, but now it's there to protect me. And I always get the feeling now that I'm sort of enclosed in this like shield of protection. And I keep sort of getting very strong messages that come through to say, son, we've got you. Pay attention, listen in, and just try and follow the instructions, and all will be well. So I feel guarded and guided, and that's where I'm up to. And, you know, if it's wrong, you know, as I say, I'm always learning. I always listen. I'm like GIllian. I've got an eidotic memory, and I can remember things. But it's almost like I don't have to try now. It's almost like presented to me when it's needed now without me trying, really. And I think rather than that coming from my intellect, I think it's coming from an innate intelligence or intuitive source that's deep within the hearts and minds, you know, the hearts of everybody. And I will shut up in a minute, but I think my job now is to yeah. No, but I feel like, you know, because, you know, we've all got loads of good stuff to share, really, but I don't want to I love the show, really. So I think my job is to share as truthfully as I can, you know, without trying to make anything up, and also to try and reconnect people to their true heart of intelligence, where the real truth is, you know, because I think this is the sort of seat of stinking thinking, right? Yeah. And this is where the solution is, really.
I love that seat of stinking feeling. I'm pretty sure Carl upstairs is going to love that as well. I'd be surprised if he doesn't comment on that, because he thinks that thinking is really stinking. We've got some comments coming in, and we're joined by Jay as well. So Jay is saying, good morning, lovelies. GIllian, I'm really resonating with what you're talking about. She joined just as you were talking. Alcohol blighted my life too, parents and others. Hence, I can't bear alcohol and rarely drink myself. Carl saying, the way of no thinking, kunihiro yamate, an increasing dysfunction of our social and economic structures signals the beginning of a new stage in consciousness. Love that. As we enter this new stage, rationality or thinking will give way to intuition. We will awaken from the illusion that we are separate individuals to an awareness of the truth that we're all one being, and our economic and social structures will reflect this new consciousness. That'd be nice. Love that. And then Jay is adding in, I experienced a sort of blackout one time when I was on antidepressant medication. It was truly frightening. Joe, I absolutely, I love that, agree with what you're saying. I experienced a stepfather who behaved as you say you did, and it was terrifying as a child. But if he'd just once taken one step towards doing what you're doing, it would have healed something in me. And then we've got Annie Lloyd saying, good morning, beautiful humans. Oh, thank you, Annie. Thanks for joining us. And Jay is saying, bless you for being so transparent. So it's all good in the hood. Everyone's loving this. And I am too.
Can I get Joe just to lift his hands up, because he's getting this great disembodied. No, you need to put them up further, because there you go. And move them fast, because they suddenly get
ascension.
You were talking with your hands, and your hands had nothing attached to them at the bottom. It was hilarious. Sorry, it was very serious.
No, it's good fun.
No, it's great.
You're doing some amazing sort of metaphysics with this backdrop. It's great.
Can I just talk about just something that's repentance, really? And there's redemption, and it always brings in this aspect of repentance. And I think that we've all been conned into believing that we're all sinners right from the start, that we're all impure, and this thing.
Dislike that.
Yeah, so some people then, because they have this mentality sort of fed into them, if you like, this social conditioning. I think that we all feel shit about ourselves right from an early age, and there's all sorts of improvements that we've got to make, and I don't see that anymore, and this, because repent is to do with being regretful and remorseful. And as we know, that most politicians on the planet don't have that, because they're primary narcissists and they can do what they like, So part of our job, I feel, is as sensitive secondary narcissists, because I do believe that everybody's got the ability for that, in this bipolarity, is to accept that sort of bipolarity, right? And really to go forward in truth. Right. And as Carl's saying, intuitively and inspirationally being guided from something deep, and not to react, but it doesn't mean that action doesn't get taken, but it's an action in a creative way based upon our innate skills and resourcefulness, But that's why some people, repent, penitentiary. Some people think that this is like a penal reform colony, and in a way it is, the earth is, and in a way, it can be seen as that, almost like that we come here to change our behavior for the better. So you could see that. But really, if it's like Taoism says, I think Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, and Judaism, they all have this sin thing going on, But I think Taoism is just go down, experience everything, sit back, and then almost like tune your way into the next action that you need to take. So my sort of philosophy these days is more about like the Taoist approach, really, that there's no sin. I mean, sin just means to miss the mark or be out of alignment. That's how I see it. It's a realigning ourselves with this sort of almost like flow, and sort of sitting in the middle of it and being chauffeur driven through all these experiences, without rowing your boat. So let the boat row you while you just take a good look around, while it's happening.
I like that analogy. Because I wanted to actually talk to you about. Oh, go on.
One translation of the word sin is debt. So actually, it's So there's another big piece around about sin. Huge big piece around about sin.
You want to talk about it now?
Actually, it's interesting when you were saying, because it was when you were saying about this kind of battle between. I think it's set up in us. There's lots of stuff. I think I've mentioned about Cal Washington stuff last week. Yeah. But he's basically referring to bits in the Bible that I've heard, but I'd never really it's almost like sometimes I sort of think I've heard it wrong. But one of the things in, I don't know whether it's in Genesis or where, let us make man in our image. Who's the our? Who's the other? We're in God. And so basically we're in God and Satan's image from that, possibly. And so that's going to be setting up this kind of dynamic right from the get-go. And it's interesting, Joe, when you said all of us feel this kind of, I can't remember your language around it, but it was
all from
all
grace.
of us feel like we're sort of in sin from our early years or something like that. But I don't remember ever feeling that, to be fair. So I don't think all of us do. I recognize there was lots of my early life that was very different, but then I think it's also to do with my level of awareness that's been very different. I look back and I've been living multiple lives, and I've been aware of living, even though my mind, it's like my mind's been my ability to translate to be here in whatever this is. I call it a construct, but that's and the other thing that Cal's saying is that basically this is because the prayer, the Lord's Prayer, I always wanted to say as it is in heaven, as it is in earth, and apparently it is actually meant to be as it is in earth, and lots of people translate it as it is on earth. Because basically this is actually on that basis, this is an enclosed system. It's a remand system for certain beings. Anyway, it's probably getting it way too in deep for this one. But
no, it's good. It's good.
To be fair, this is one because I think, I don't know, I've been trying to unpick this a lot recently because I don't believe anybody is beyond redemption. Anybody.
No.
Yeah.
And I do sort of almost think that was there's so many gifts from my mother. God love her. But it was because she was disgusting at times. I mean, horrible. But I just couldn't help but love her. She was my mother. And she was horrible, and she lashed out and everything else like that. She tended to lash out emotionally, but it was from a pain. And even as a young child, I kind of got that. But then, so sorry, I think I might have lost bits of that. It's this, it's almost like I've always put it down to optimism. It's like, well, if there's a 1% chance of something good happening, well, there's a 1% chance of something good happening. And I don't believe anybody's beyond redemption on that basis. And I almost wonder whether I'm and others here to hold that space of redemption for any that are here who are actually being held here, that actually they're still open to redemption. Does that make any sense? I'm sure there's something going on with that.
Yeah, I just want to quickly go back to what Carl shared. As we enter this new stage, rationality or thinking will give way to intuition, will awaken from the illusion that we're separate individuals. Now, if we are not separate individuals, and there are some people that are doing some untold levels of what we might refer to as absolute evil here on this planet, whatever you want to call it, we are by default connected to them.
Yeah.
And we can other them as much as possible, but there must be a seed of that in us. And if we're good and consider ourselves to be good, there must be a seed of that in them too. And I sometimes think that people have, and it's not a very popular view, but I sometimes think that people that have come here to do unspeakable evil are actually taking one for the team, because they're really waking us up. Yeah. They're doing it to such an extent that we see it, we can't ignore it. It's in our face. I mean, one thing I've noticed is like that, some people who really go into, like, they have a really awful upbringing. There are some people that have an awful upbringing, really violently abusive parents that really make something of themselves. And, it seems to defy all possibility. And then there are people that have really quite normal childhoods that turn into basket cases along the way and don't really make it. And I think it's because they've such an awful entry onto this planet. They get really clear about what's true for them and what's not true for them. And then they're really free to work on what they want to. Whereas, people that are experienced a little bit of this, a little bit of that, sometimes it takes us our whole lifetimes to get clear about what we're thinking. So I think these people who are practicing these strong styles, as much as I dislike them at times, most of the time, I think they're taking one for the team. And we're allegedly connected. I've got an awakened friend who, talks about remembering other lifetimes of doing some really hideous things, and how part of her process was to absolutely integrate every one of those experiences, you know, the bloodlust that she felt, you know, in these other lifetimes. And I remember being horrified hearing that story, but then, and judging probably, going, ooh, check you out. But then like years later, or not years, like months later, thinking, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I must have that in me as well. You know, like the whole idea, my shit don't stink, but it does. We've all got a bit of that going on.
What about this then?
Go on.
What if it's all about mind at all sorts of different levels, you know, different constructions, different dimensions, all about mind. And really the body, right, is just the vehicle through which consciousness expands. Okay. So in a sense, here's a sort of play on words. It's immaterial, really, the body and what happens to the body, right? Because that's just the vehicle, right? And so what's actually happening on the planet, right? This is a hard one, this really. What's happening on the planet is that the body-mind complex, or the ego, right, isn't the real us. We are the I am. We are the soul experiencing through the body. So essentially, what's happening to people's bodies across the planet doesn't matter. What do you think about that? And that's hard, that one, you know, because if somebody's like child is being abused in all sorts of horrible ways and all that, to actually put that across, I'm not suggesting, by the way, I'm suggesting people just need to feel the way into this, but to put that across that, oh, it doesn't matter, it's only a body, right? That's difficult, that really. That's
really a tough paper round, isn't it? I interviewed a lady called Serena Faith Masterson, and she's written a book called I'm Serena, and she has a very beautifully written book about her experiences of growing up with parents from the CIA, and they were part of a which she I don't want to say it because it will flag my channel massively, and also I just don't want to say those words, but she was ritually abused by a particular sect of people who did everything they could to kill her in many different ways, from when she was born. And you can read about it in a book. She doesn't actually go into it too much, actually, but she does factually mention it. She doesn't mention it in such a way to kind of horrify people. But her story actually is about how she coped with it. And there were times when her soul became very separate from her body, and she had multiple personalities. At one point, well over 300 personalities. And her story actually is how she reintegrated each one of these personalities. And each of these personalities, whether they were little boys that were 5 that were slightly cheeky, I can't remember his name, but he was a really great character, you know, to the slightly surly 7-year-old girl who's really suspicious, they all needed to come back in and be reintegrated. It's an incredible story. Now she, you know, works as a coach, and I've met her in person just this year. She's a fantastic person, and you just don't know how people can get through something like that. And so when I hear, you know, something like that, you know, like, gosh, what would happen if that was my body? I think of Serena, because I know it is possible. You know, she's done it. But I also know that there are possibly people listening in right now, and who listen in the catch up, who have been abused within the family, and in their childhood. And that's a really tough one that you've laid on the table there, Joe. But I really appreciate that you've said that, because, you know, one of the things that I notice about these times is there are certain subjects that you're not allowed to, like certain things you're not allowed to go to and say, like, this is too painful, we can't go there. And I sometimes think those things stop the conversation, and it stops the healing as well. Thank you for that. In fact, we've got a comment coming in right now. In my life, I also believe that everyone was savable, but that came from my need to fix things so that my life felt better. This is classic behavior of alcoholic parents' offspring. I've lived through childhood abuse by placing myself in a fantasy fairy tale world. It's what you have to do to survive. Thank you, Jay, for sharing that. Whew. Where to now?
Can I quickly respond to Jay's first?
Yeah.
To those two comments? I know the texture of those two situations, and I know what I'm feeling now isn't that. It's not an urge to save at all, and because I certainly have gone through that. I can make them better. That whole young child, I can make my parents better thing. The other thing I realized that's interesting is 3 years ago, just coming up, actually 3 years next month, I just went off alcohol. It was really weird. It was just like, I cannot imagine putting that stuff into my body again. There's something about alcohol that does something to our bodies that makes it permeable, or it's like not our bodies, but our sort of our totality.
It's called spirit, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it's like a possession, or it can be.
Or it can open doors to possession.
Absolutely. I think it does. It's disinhibitory in that it allows all the repressed, suppressed stuff to come out, like the Romans say, in vino veritas. Get a few scoops down you, and what you're hiding, all emerges really, and there's no control. And that's what I got addicted to. It was the freedom of it all, because I was completely sort of dispossessed, actually, And so the thing about that is, all that came out was like all the instincts that had been repressed, right, from some social conditioning that were against my natural inclinations. All the natural stuff came out, but because it was so warped, that thing we said a couple of weeks ago, you're only as sick as your secrets, and I think that's what came out. All the stuff that I was ashamed of, felt guilty about, I couldn't give a shit. It released me. I was like an absolute maniac. They used to. I played rugby a lot, and they could ply me with a certain amount of alcohol to get me into like wild tiger stage, and they just flipped the ball to me, and I'd go through like a rocket. You see what I mean? So it sort of disinhibited and released all this compressed atomic energy that was trying to get out. Now I realize the way to do it is you've almost got to like let the cap off very slowly and naturally, and understand every step of the way then, and that's what seems to happen with me. And the other thing I've learned is, and very, very strongly I get this, is that you have to release things in the order that they were put down in, right? And this is difficult because sometimes you can go to coaches and they could say you need to work on that, and unless they're actually psychically tuned into the soul's progress really clearly, that can actually stop you and block you from what you need to do. So that's the whole thing about learning to listen and trust this deep intuitive sense and be guided by that, And of course, we all make mistakes, and I couldn't give a shit now about making mistakes, because my intention is not to harm anybody if I can help it, but sometimes you just got to look at somebody the wrong way and off they go, so that's where I'm up to. I don't know whether that makes sense.
It really does. I just want to bring up Carl's comment from earlier. What in the idea of sin is their value? It can't be all bad. Or it can't be all bad. It's like a question. I didn't say it like a question. Although the Catholic industry hasn't helped, I have it as anything other than the truth. Joe just said this as I was typing. I like what you're saying about going through things in a particular order. And I noticed that with homeopathic treatment, whatever comes up in the session, that layer is being worked on. And, they all have that sort of like calm authority that at some point soon you'll be back to work on another layer. And it comes off in its own. They don't even go delving really to see which layer comes up first, because the patient reveals it themselves. And it's that listening. I want to ask, obviously you say that you were a secondary narcissist and you were ferociously violent and destroyed things, and we're talking about redemption. And I think at some level we're also talking about forgiveness and stuff. How did things come back into an order for you in terms of your family relationships? Like you say, you've lost things.
Yeah. I had to go through. Sorry.
I imagine that you've, in my head, you've had a happy ending. I just imagine, when I see you, Joe, I just think you're a successful person. You're an honest person. You're clearly a kind-hearted person. And I just think, well, my wish for you is that you were able to be forgiven and to work on your relationships. But is that what's happened?
Yeah, in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, right, I have to follow that. The most important thing in my life is my sobriety. And sobriety to me means emotional calm and clear-mindedness. That's all I'm interested in. And I can feel it now when I'm being knocked off balance, whether it be by high-frequency radioactivity and all sorts of other stuff like that. You know, I can feel myself being knocked off balance now. Before I do anything else is I just let go, take a step back, and get to this like neutral point. And that's what I've learned over the years, is how to get quickly into that sort of position of neutrality. So what I had to do that is I had to make a list of all persons that I harmed, all of them, right from childhood, all the stuff that came up. So I was guided into sitting in this neutrality and just asking me heart or my soul, please show me who I need to put on this list. Well, there's Christ. It was a massive list, right? I mean, so I had to go back then, right, and directly face each individual person and say, I am so sorry. I've realized the error of my ways, right? I'm so sorry. I obviously didn't mean to do any of this, but I've obviously hurt you. If there's anything at all I can do to, like, and most people said to me, right, they said to me, Joe, you're a lovely, lovely fella, but when you've got a few drinks down you, you're such a pain in the arse and you're really horrible. You know what I mean? And most people said that. Some people said to me, I never want to see your horrible effing face again, right? And that hurt me, right? And, you know, there's only one person I know that I've not been I mean, you have a sponsor who's an elder, let's call them an elder, who's been through the process. And you have to go through the list with him. And he gets an intuitive sense of, no, don't worry about that. If that person ever pops up in your life, just say sorry, you know. So you don't go back to old relationships because they might be happily married now and you don't want to be causing trouble. So there is a sort of a realistic sort of way to do this. Anyway, there's only really one person I treated, right, like shit more than anybody else on this planet. And I've never been able to go back and make a direct amends to her as well, you know. And I went back to my sponsor and he said, you have to trust now, trust in the spirit, trust in God, trust in whatever you want to call this thing. If it's meant to be that you meet this person, then just say sorry to them. The most important thing was you say sorry and then you shut your gob, because this is only about cleaning your side of the street. It's not by saying, I only did this because if you hadn't have done that, I wouldn't. You see, and then you're in it then. All you do is you just go back, you say sorry. And of course, I meant this to everybody. You know, I hurt a lot of people, right? And of course, I regret it, but I don't feel guilty about it now because I know that these things that happened were so powerful that when the drink came in, they almost like unleashed themselves. And that was the problem, you see. So, you know, people used to say to me, oh, you must have known that you'd done that and you did it on purpose. I honestly didn't, you know, and that's the thing, you know. I don't know whether that's made sense, but to get back to my kids now love me, right? I've got back with all my kids. I reconciled with all my relationships and all that, you know, except for this one, as I say. And everything's turned out right. And to look at my life now, from the park bench to where I call it from park bench to podium, right? It's like it's happening to somebody else, because, you know, there's a little Joe in me to thinking, how is this happening, you know? And so to go back, Louisa, yeah, my life has turned out to be beyond my wildest dreams now, you know.
Beautiful. I'm glad I asked. That is beautiful. And I think it must take a lot of courage to do that. And also the courage to just step away, you know, if somebody doesn't want to have that conversation with you, just to accept that they have a right to manage their side of it in the way that works for them.
And can I just say about it takes a lot of courage. It's a necessary step, because if you don't do it, then you drink again. And I know that because I spent 9 years trying to avoid stuff, right? And they also said to me, is there anything in there now in this inventory? It's a personal moral inventory, they call it, you know. And is there anything now that you're going to take to the grave with you that you can't admit to? And I searched every nook and cranny of my mind and there was nothing. And that's what freed me up. But it's a necessary step in all spiritual programs, as far as I'm concerned, is humiliation must come before, you know, so before humility. And I think that you almost have to put yourself in a position to be humiliated, because that's what clears the path, really. And finally, it says, you know, before serenity, and serenity means peace of mind. before serenity must come emotional turmoil. So we can't get away with it. We've got to go through it, really, you know.
Beautiful. I'm feeling a bit emotional, and Jay's saying, I'm crying now. She's saying, GIllian, I just want to give you the biggest hug ever. Oh, my Joe, I salute you. Wow. So, you know, this is really like touched a lot of people. Owen saying, thank you for a great week of shows. I've been watching from my sickbed. Oh no, I hope you're feeling better. Getting better by the day. Have a great weekend. And to you too, my friend. This is really fitting, I think. You know, it's a strange situation to have these conversations most days. I noticed that I'm going through quite a few ups and downs myself, because each day I'm considering more and more things. And it's an absolute pleasure to have you both on, you know, and to hear people talking from a really authentic and beautiful place, and a place of transformation. GIllian, did you want to add anything about how maybe in, you know, when you went bonkers and you said you felt sort of not dispossessed, but sort of disinhibited as well, you know, you had that freedom to be the crazy woman. Was there a way that things came back together?
Well, I was going to say, just the thing, I suppose I do have a habit. I mean, sometimes it's straightforward bypassing, but I tend to sort of jazz things up a bit. The sort of downside of that was, I mean, I was always watching for people's reactions to me. And then if I thought somebody was being strange with me, I thought, oh no, because my horror was going into a work meeting and just, I don't know what I might have done, but, you know, probably told everybody what I thought of them. But, you know, but and it would have been founded on nothing. This is the thing, because there wasn't, you know, the sort of connection to reality, or whatever the heck reality is meant to be, wasn't there. So I was always terrified of that. And of course, because I was behaving like that, then they did start acting odd towards me, which just fueled it. But I mean, at one stage, I mean, I had an absolute piece of work of a boss at one stage, who I'd actually put into the position of my boss. That we were both managers of two departments that should have been merged. And I'd said, look, we're both turning up at the same meeting. I went to the medical director and said, we're both turning up at these same meetings. Why don't we put it so that I deputise for her, but she's my boss, and that's fine. I didn't really see her for who she was at the time. Anyway, she then decided she was going to reorganise the department. And I told her that at that stage I was in my floridity, or whatever that word is. And I told her that the times I found most challenging were the middle of winter and middle of summer. And I had an interview for my own job 2 days before Christmas. That wasn't by accident. And she'd actually done the interview panel with people I'd said I found challenging. It was quite one woman who wasn't one of the people I'd said. So I through the interview, I was winking at her, which is quite normal, isn't it? That interview should have been stopped. There was three psychiatric nurses on that interview. That interview shouldn't have even started, never mind. And, you know, needless to say, I didn't get my job back. But it was just, it was something else. And so there was other things. This is the other thing about the redemption piece. It's interesting because in terms of human beings, I probably haven't really kind of found that redemption with them. I think I've got this kind of belief. I know I've got a story running that people who like me don't really know me.
Right.
That's a big piece. And then the other one is the other piece about this redemption piece is it's actually the whole God thing, which is really what this whole thing is about in terms of well, when I say this whole thing, it depends on, I'm not speaking for other people, but I know that's another one I've been avoidant with. And it's like, why have I been so avoidant with that?
Yeah.
And I did spot one thing, and it comes back to this: let them make us, and let man be made in our image, because there's not just one candidate for the position of God. And names. I mean, it's when I'm working with clients and stuff, and I call them lodges. It's like there's others in there that aren't the soul that chose that body when they came in, and so I think lodges sounds a nice furry term to call them, because some of them are nasty pieces of work, but most of them aren't. They're just a bit lost. And so, or just stuck energy or whatever. And sometimes they're fragments of the person themselves that's just got in the wrong bit. And they're causing trouble on that basis. But it's so, the word you is such a broad term that can mean anything. And so I get very specific, and I say, when I say, if I was talking about me, when I say the name GIllian, I only mean the soul that chose this physical body, and I'll pat the body when they came in, no one else. And so be really clear on using that name. And I was talking to another friend, and they said, she said, she was said, call me by my name, call me God. So it's just, and I know that this whole thing about redemption for me personally, and I'm only speaking for me personally, is that relationship with God. And I've never spoken this way before. I mean, I went and got reconfirmed when I was got confirmed when I was at university, and joined the God Squad there, and all this sort of evangelical Christians and everything else like that. And I really believed it was truth for me at the time. And then married a son of a preacher man. I love that song for that. Not only that, a gay son of a preacher man. I don't go for halves.
That's a hard story, isn't it?
So had all of the evangelical stuff there, because they were, I think they're probably nominally Baptists, but it was, his mother was a lovely woman. She still is. She's still alive, but not an easy woman either. But I love her dearly too. But Shetlander, and Shetland's an interesting place for that, because it was he lived there for a while and was spat on by the local kids because he was the minister's son and all that kind of stuff. So it's been an interesting journey with this whole concept of God, and I do think redemption cannot be separated from this. Whatever. I mean, I've got a Hindu friend who says his prayers morning and evening. And so that's not the same framework of this relationship with God, but it is a relationship with God.
Yeah.
Anyway. So, yeah.
Whew. Well, we have spoken about so many different things. Thank you so much.
Just before we go, can I say something?
Yeah,
Sorry.
Please do.
So somebody said to me recently, they described me as a psychopath with a big heart, and I like that. It makes me feel good. And I've just noticed that there's like a big black shadow behind me, and I like that, because I don't want to be associated with all that bright white light, stuff. I quite like this big dark black thing that's behind me, and people have said to me they can sense a deep dark energy, and I'm made up with that.
Actually, Joe, the funny thing is you've got dark to one side,
I
and
saw
you've got
that,
band of light the other side as well.
Is it perfectly balanced? That's the main thing.
Like in between, the gap between your headphone and your head. So you got this bright white and then dark.
Maybe I'm in the space between breaths then.
That's perfect.
Sorry.
Like a halo on one side, isn't it?
Yeah. It's actually like the perfect analogy for, how this whole thing has gone today. It's lovely. Well, I'm going to call a close to this then. I'm a bit exhausted. I've loved it. I really love these conversations. I need to have a bit of a rest and some breakfast. And I'm sure you guys need to get on with your days. And I love the fact that we've been joined here by so many great people today. So thank you so much for sharing real deep stuff. And I'd love to speak with you both again, about other stuff, explore things. So thank you very much. Yeah, go on.
Can I make one suggestion, because it has been heavy today, and there was at one point I was feeling it very, very strong. Almost, can we just, before you close, can we just have a moment just to allow anybody watching later just to regroup?
Sure, let's do it.
I'm happy to hold that space if you're okay with that. I'm not going to do it.
Totally okay.
Anything. I'm literally just going to hold the container.
Sure.
Okay, and then just bringing that into completion.
Thank you very much, Gillian. Louisa, thank you. GIllian, lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Lots of love. Have a great weekend and catch you another time. Bye for now.